The rain had started just after midnight, soft at first, then louder, like a warning. The power had flickered out, leaving the house bathed in shadows and silence. I was in the kitchen, clutching a mug of tea when he appeared, my brother-in-law, shirt clinging to his chest, hair damp from the storm. We exchanged a quiet glance, both knowing the house was empty except for the two of us. Then he stepped closer, his voice low, steady, and said something I never thought I would hear from him. In that one moment the air changed, and so did everything between us. It had been one of those long, gray days where the sky hung low and heavy, threatening to collapse. My sister and I were supposed to spend the weekend together at the lake house, a small cozy property passed down through our family. But at the last minute she had called to say she could not make it. Something about a client emergency, too much paperwork, and needing to stay in the city. I had already arrived by then, groceries unpacked, fireplace lit, and music humming softly through the old speakers. She had suggested that her husband, Ethan, come by the next day to drop off a few things she had left behind, including a bag with her sketchbooks and a forgotten set of house keys. I had said yes without giving it much thought. I had known Ethan for nearly 6 years. He was calm, dependable, and kind, with a quiet way of observing the world that often made people underestimate his depth. He rarely spoke more than necessary, and he always carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who knew who he was. I had always liked him in the uncomplicated way one is meant to like a sibling spouse, respectfully, distantly. But there had been moments over the years, subtle ones. A glance held a second too long. The way his gaze sometimes lingered when he thought no one noticed. I had dismissed those things every time. I had no reason to look any closer. Or maybe I did and I chose not to. He arrived the following evening just as the rain began. The timing felt cinematic in the way real life rarely is. I opened the door to see him standing there, tall and soaked through, water running down the line of his jaw. His hands were tucked in the pockets of his jacket, and his smile was warm but uncertain. "I did not think it would pour like this," he said, stepping inside. I handed him a towel and took his coat. There was something in the way he looked at me, something unspoken pressing behind his eyes. I ignored it. We sat by the fire, sipping on tea, the kind I knew he liked, black with a hint of cinnamon. The conversation was light, meandering through updates about work, mutual friends, and my sister. He spoke about how exhausted she had been lately, how the pressure at her firm was getting heavier, how distant she had seemed. I listened, nodding, offering words of comfort that felt automatic, but sincere. Still, a part of me noticed how he kept looking at me, not in a way that was inappropriate, but in a way that felt close. Too close for comfort, or maybe just close enough to stir something I had long ignored. The lights flickered once, then again, before going out entirely. I let out a soft laugh, surprised, while Ethan stood to check the fuse box. A few minutes later he returned, flashlight in hand, shaking his head. "Out for the night. We might have to make do with candles," he said. I found the old candle box and handed him one. He lit it slowly, the flame dancing between us. In that dim light, everything felt softer and somehow more dangerous. As the hours passed, the silence of the house became a presence of its own. There was no television to fill the space, no internet, no music, just the sound of rain tapping against the windows and the occasional creak of wood settling. We moved into the living room, blankets over our laps, and shared a bottle of wine he had brought from the city. One glass turned into 2, then 3. And soon we were not just talking. We were remembering. The early days, how we had met. That one family trip where we had all gotten stuck in the mountains during a snowstorm. How I had once helped him choose an anniversary gift for my sister. How we had laughed that day in the bookstore, hands brushing over the same hardcover. The warmth in the room shifted. I felt it. I knew he did too. His voice grew softer, the way people speak when they are no longer guarding their truths. He told me. I listened, something tight twisting inside me. And then without warning he said it. "I have thought about you more than I should have." The words landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading in every direction. My breath caught and I turned my face slightly away, unsure of how to respond. My heart was beating faster than it should. My thoughts collided with one another in messy, tangled lines. He had not touched me, had not moved closer, had not said anything else. But that sentence, that one quiet sentence, had changed everything. I stood slowly under the pretense of refilling my glass, but really I needed space. I walked into the kitchen, fingers trembling slightly as I gripped the counter. I stared out the window at the rain, trying to remember what boundaries looked like, what loyalty felt like, what it meant to hold your breath and let silence say what words should not. He did not follow me immediately. When he finally walked in, he stood by the door, respectful of the invisible line between us. "I should not have said that," he murmured. "But I will not lie to you. I have felt it for a long time. I do not know what to do with it anymore." I turned to him, every part of me pulled taut. I saw the pain in his eyes, the confusion, the hope. I saw all of it in something else I was not ready to name. My voice came low, steadier than I felt. "This is not our story to write." He nodded, but he did not leave. The house was silent again, except for the rain. But inside me it felt as if a storm had just been let loose. I had spent years controlling every emotion, every stray thought that ever wandered too far. I had taught myself to feel guilt even before doing anything wrong because guilt was easier than regret. And yet in that moment I did not feel guilty. I felt seen fully and completely in a way I had not allowed myself to be for years. Ethan stayed standing by the door for what felt like forever. Neither of us moved, but the air between us was vibrating with everything unsaid. There was a weight in the room now, the kind that comes from emotional honesty so raw, so unexpected it makes you forget how to breathe. I looked at him again, this time not through the lens of who he was supposed to be, my sister's husband, but through the lens of what he had just confessed. His voice echoed in my mind. "I have thought about you more than I should have." That sentence was no longer just words. It had bloomed into something living, something neither of us could take back. I wanted to tell him to leave. I wanted to say that nothing had changed. I wanted to make this right, but instead I stood there frozen as he took one slow step forward and then another. He did not touch me. He did not cross the line fully. But his eyes searched mine for something. Permission perhaps, or understanding. "I know what this looks like," he whispered. "And I know how wrong it sounds. But I meant every word. I should have stopped him. I should have reminded him of my sister. I should have reminded myself, but I did not. Because in that moment something cracked inside me. Something I had locked away for too long. A part of me that was tired of being strong. Tired of pretending that I had everything together. A part of me that remembered what it felt like to be wanted. Not for convenience. Not out of habit, but deeply, madly, achingly wanted. "I do not know what you expect me to say," I finally replied, my voice tight. "Nothing," he said. "Just do not pretend like you have not felt it too." His words hit like a tremor beneath my feet. I closed my eyes and images from years past flashed before me. Our quiet moments during family dinners. The times he had offered to help carry groceries to my car. The way he had looked at me that night when I had cried after my breakup years ago. Sitting on the back porch with a bottle of wine and tears that refused to stop. I had buried those feelings because they were inconvenient, because I was loyal, because I was not the kind of woman who destroyed families. And I still was not. But now I was standing in a kitchen with a man who saw something in me that I had long stopped seeing in myself. And for a moment I allowed myself to wonder, what if? He reached out and placed his hand gently on the counter beside mine, not touching me, just close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. I looked down at our hands, so close, and I felt the tears rise unexpectedly. "I am scared," I admitted. "Not of you, but of what this would mean." He exhaled slowly. "So am I." We stayed like that for minutes, just breathing. I could hear the thunder now, low and distant. It felt appropriate, a warning, a soundtrack to a decision I did not know how to make. Slowly I stepped away from the counter, needing space to think, to breathe, to remember who I was. "I do not know if you are confused," I said, "or if this is some reaction to your marriage falling apart. But I cannot be a mistake you make on your way to figuring yourself out." Ethan looked down, his jaw tightening. "You are not a mistake. You never were." The intensity in his voice made my knees weak. I sat down at the small table by the window trying to ground myself. He followed but did not sit. He stood across from me, hands on the back of the chair, watching me. "I have not told anyone this," he said quietly. "But your sister and we have not really been okay for over a year now. We sleep in the same house, but we are strangers. We go through motions. She is married to her job. And he paused. "I stopped trying a while ago until I saw you again." I shook my head, unsure if I was angry or simply overwhelmed. "You cannot come to me looking for answers to your unhappiness." "I am not," he said, stepping back. "I am just tired of pretending. You make me feel alive again. That is the truth. Whether anything happens or not, I needed to say it." We sat in the aching silence again. I looked at him, really looked at him, not as my sister's husband, but as a man standing in front of me, vulnerable and flawed and honest. And for the first time I let myself acknowledge what I had buried, that I had felt it too. For a long time, that some part of me, small and quiet and ashamed, had wondered what if. And then he said something that broke me. If I had met you first. I closed my eyes. Because I had thought the same thing more times than I could count. I stood up, walked past him and grabbed a blanket from the sofa. I handed it to him and pointed to the guest room. You should sleep in there tonight. His shoulders slumped slightly but he nodded. Okay. Before he turned away, he looked at me one last time. I am sorry for everything, for saying this, for putting you in this position. I could not hold it in anymore. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Good night, Ethan. He walked down the hall and closed the door behind him. And I stood there alone with the sound of the rain still tapping against the windows and the weight of all the emotions that had finally been set free. That night, I did not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house louder than any noise. My mind kept retracing every word Ethan had said, every glance exchanged, every breath that hung between us like a question waiting to be answered. I turned from side to side, hoping exhaustion would pull me under. But sleep refused to come. I felt like I was standing on a narrow bridge, a chasm of guilt and longing on either side. And I did not know which way would lead to peace or destruction. I kept thinking about my sister, her laugh, her fierce independence, the way she had always been the one with direction, the one with plans. She had built a life where I often felt like a supporting character. And yet somewhere in that carefully structured life of hers, something had fractured between her and Ethan. I had seen it for years. The growing distance, the absence of warmth. But I had never imagined I would become part of the space that filled that gap. I had never allowed myself to imagine what it meant when Ethan's eyes lingered too long, or when he made sure to always ask how I was, even when others did not. My heart ached with confusion. How could something feel so wrong and yet in the quietest parts of my soul feel so inevitable? I hated myself for not being angry. I hated that I had wanted to hear those words. That a part of me had longed to be noticed, to be chosen, not by any man, but by someone who actually saw through the layers of strength and silence I had used to protect myself. I walked into the kitchen just after sunrise, needing coffee more than clarity. I froze when I saw him already there, sitting at the table, the untouched mug in front of him still steaming. He looked like he had not slept either. His eyes were red, rimmed, his jaw clenched in a way that spoke of restraint, not regret. "Morning," he said softly. I nodded. "Morning." The silence stretched between us again, awkward now, heavy with things we could not say and things we had already said that could not be taken back. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood with my back to him, trying to pretend like this was any normal morning. "I am sorry," he said again. "For last night." I turned to face him. "You said what you felt. I cannot fault you for that. But I put you in an impossible place." "You did," I admitted. "But the truth is it was not just you. I let that space exist between us. I never said anything. I never stopped you." He looked down, his fingers tracing the rim of his mug. "I think about how we got here and it terrifies me because I did not plan it. I did not wake up one day and think I would fall for someone I should not." The word fall sent a chill through me because that was the thing. We were no longer just circling some vague idea of attraction. We were tumbling into something deeper, more dangerous. "I do not know what this is," I said. "Or if it is just loneliness disguised as connection, but I do know that I cannot hurt my sister." "Not like this," he nodded. "I would never ask you to. But you already have," I whispered. "Not in words, but with everything you said, everything you felt." He looked up at me, eyes glassy. "What if nothing changes? What if we just go on pretending this never happened?" I took a deep breath. Then we would be living a lie. And I have spent too long burying what I feel to start lying again. Now I sat across from him, the table between us suddenly feeling like a boundary I needed. A shield against the temptation that still lingered in the way he looked at me. I searched his face for the man I had always known. The man who had once been family, safe, uncomplicated. But that man had been replaced by someone more real. Someone who had seen me and shown me his own wounds in return. "I do not want to be the reason you leave your marriage," I said. "And I do not want you to carry this guilt forever. If we care about each other at all, we have to walk away from this now." The words were final, but the ache in my chest was anything but resolved. He nodded slowly, accepting the weight of what I had said. "I think I already knew that," he said. "I just needed to hear it out loud." We sat there, two people filled with feelings that had no place to go, memories that would never fully leave us. And as the light from the window warmed the space between us, we both understood that no matter how strong the pull had been, some boundaries had to remain unbroken. Because love, when misplaced, could destroy far more than it ever intended to heal. Weeks passed and the air between us slowly shifted back to something more neutral, though never truly the same. Ethan and I avoided long conversations, kept to small talk, and always made sure we were never left alone again. It was not out of shame. It was out of respect. We had made a choice, a difficult one, and we honored it in the silence we shared. My sister remained unaware, her world untouched by the storm that had quietly passed through her home. And I held on to that, her smile, her trust, as proof that we had done the right thing. I began to feel stronger, more centered, as though the fire that had once threatened to consume me had instead burned away the parts of me that needed to be rebuilt. I started painting again, reconnecting with passions I had long buried. I focused on becoming someone I could be proud of, someone who did not take the easy path, even when the heart begged for it. Ethan and I never spoke about that night again. But in our brief glances and polite conversations, there was a shared understanding, a mutual forgiveness, and a quiet sadness. Life returned to normal, or as close as it could get. And as I stood on my front porch one evening watching the sunset paint the sky in amber and gold, I felt peace. Not because nothing had happened, but because we had chosen to let it end before it ruined everything. That was our redemption.